Right. Good evening. Dr. Davis and I are pleased to report on something that we've been working on here as a staff for very targeted for the past year, and we would like to share a little bit of the ins and outs of how we've come to some of this work and talk a little bit about some data and to share where do we go from here. So the mission, and was outlined in the packet, but it was important for Dr. Davis and I to really speak to you about it because as we have begun and engaged in the work, it has been very important for us to continue to tease out our mission, to talk about our mission, and to remind ourselves of what we're actually doing when we talk about or when we say what the year of the black male is. So I'm going to read it. I know we don't typically read what's on the PowerPoint, but I'm going to read it just for the sake of, for our hearing and for our understanding. And that is, our mission is to dig deeper into the experience of black male students by holding candid conversations amongst faculty, staff, students, parents, and the community about organizational obstacles, institutional systems, and beliefs to find positive ways to work together to solve those challenges and achieve racial equity. So what we do understand is that this is a coming together of all of our constituencies here at ETHS to address an issue that is not specific to ETHS. It is a national crisis, and this is our way of coming together and figuring out what it is that we can do here in Evanston to change some of the life trajectories and outcomes of some black male students. So this is our foundation. And we will say this early on, and that is that this is not a program, right? We don't want to call this an initiative. We don't want to add any of our educational jargon to how we talk about implementation for some of this. What we're really trying to engage here is a new way to do school, right? What we're really trying to engage is a way for us to think about how do we run our school? How do we engage in the day-to-day processes of teaching and learning and support in all domains for black males as we continue to begin to do this work? So as I said, this is not a program. If it were a program, we would have programmed our way out of this a long time ago, but it's about reframing what it is that we're doing and trying to figure out, moving forward with such a complex challenge. According to Sean Harper, he writes, and he's done some study on this work, he's in higher ed, does a lot of studies with tracking black male student achievement from kindergarten through high school, and what he says is it's also important for us to renounce a single narrative of black males in public schools, and that's something for us interesting and very helpful for us to lift up, that we would also want to share with you that there isn't a single narrative about the black male experience here at ETHS. We cannot confine a single story for what it's like to walk through the halls as a black male here at ETHS. But we can find that there are some similar patterns and some very consistent experiences that are happening with black males that we would like to address. And something that Dr. Witherspoon wrote in his back to school letter, and that is that we're choosing to have an asset frame to this, and that is to say that our black males have high aspirations. They care about school, they care about ETHS, and they are putting forth a highly effective effort to succeed, and that's really important for us to sort through. Okay, so this is a slide that I shared with our faculty and staff on the first day of Institute Days, where Dr. Davis and I gave an address for a lot of the things that we're doing around here. And our work with black males can be really pretty much described in this slide here when we talk about equity versus equality. A lot of folks, this is important for us to continue to define what do we mean by equity, and that is essentially doing what it takes to get whatever student that we have in front of us, whatever students that we are working with, the opportunity to achieve. And so I did thank the staff because we've seen some promising signs in the data that we will share with you in a moment that was in your packet, because a lot of students, a lot of teachers did take the extra time to call, to call home, to call each other, to reach out to me, and whatever resources that we had here at ETHS that was available to support Black male students, because we specifically named this as an effort of something that we wanted to address. So once again, I think it's important to define what we mean by equity. And so when we talk about educating, supporting, and affirming Black male identities and lifting them up in the school, it's important to define equity, because that's what we're talking about. So where did this work come from? Well, about 18 months ago, our building leadership team went through Beyond Diversity 2. We're all familiar with, most of us are familiar with Beyond Diversity 1, but we went through Beyond Diversity 2, and then out of that experience, and we have always been isolating race and talking about a lot of social constructions in school, race, gender, class, all of the things. And so out of that experience in Beyond Diversity 2, where our administrators, our superintendent, the teacher leaders, deans, we were all sort of challenged with to reflect on how we were working to support Black male students in school. We understand what the national context is, and we also understand what our local context is. And we were all challenged, and Dr. Witherspoon, after that meeting, began to have very candid and open conversations with us and his cabinet about what we were going to do to address the issue outside of Beyond Diversity. We can get up and profess. We said a lot in that experience, but how were we going to move that forward? And so last June, we had a leadership team retreat where we talked a little bit about some data and what we could all do to sort of move the needle and actually started to hold ourselves accountable for better outcomes for Black males.
All right, so we have some early indicators to share. They're in the packet. I just wanted to take a moment to walk through those indicators with everybody. These early indicators on this page are pretty much contextual to 9th grade. Our focus was 9th grade Black male students. We saw a higher percentage of students earning more A's and B's, a lower percentage of D's and F's, more GPAs above 2.5 in grade 9, and also overall when we pulled back and looked at Black males across the school. We saw an increase in credits earned in 9th grade, and what that means is we saw more students making progress and being on track to graduate coming out of 9th grade. We saw fewer tardies, fewer behavior incidents in 9th grade and overall, a higher rate of attendance at Wild Kid Academy for 9th grade Black male students, higher participation in extracurricular activities, and significantly an increase. We nearly doubled our individual career and academic plan completion for 9th graders for Black males. So so now I'm going to just dig into the actual, I'm going to share a table. Yeah, I'll drive. Okay. For improvements in 9th grade. This is a lot to digest. I'm just going to pick out a few data points that I think are indicative of the work we're doing and the work we need to continue to push forward. If we look at one that jumps out to me is students with a GPA of 2.5 or higher. You'll see we had, and the ends are up there, in 16-17 we had 110 Black male freshmen, and in 17-18 we had 136 Black male freshmen. We go from 45% of those students with a GPA of 2.5 to 54% with a GPA of 2.5. Earning 12 credits or more is also important. That's the on track to graduate. We went from 81 to 88%. Absences, students with less than 9 days absences, which would be considered chronic absences, we went from 69% to 83%. Zero behavior incidences from 51 to 63%. Students attending Wild Kid Academy, I really need to highlight that, from 49 to 63%. We'll talk a little bit about that later as a specific strategy that really touched on different levels of the organization. And look at that ICAP completion from 41 to 88. I misspoke a minute ago. We more than doubled our ICAP completion for black male students in ninth grade. And again, that was a focused effort. Extracurricular participation was up, so there's a lot to look at. There's a lot to be able to say. These are early indicators of promise, and we are moving in the right direction. Let me look at, if I pull back. Now, our focus was ninth grade, but there was a residual effect on students in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And the ends are there, 455 in 16 and 17, and 439 students, black male students in 17, 18. This is our school. If our school were black male students, that's what the population is. And you'll see that's a very large number to move. Significantly, GPAs of 2.5 and above went from 46% to 49%. Don't underestimate what goes into that. That's a lot of work to make that progress. You see GPAs of 2.0 and above also increasing. Students with less than 9 days absent went from 65 to 71% in 1 year. And students with behavior instances, with 0 behavior instances, that also increased from 52 to 59. So what we saw here, really what we're looking at is we focused our work on ninth grade and on black males and working to change and to think about. We did both adaptive work and we did technical work, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as a preview to that. But what we saw was that by focusing on ninth grade the way we did, we actually saw effect throughout the school. And that's a very powerful takeaway. Again, there's a lot of work to be done here. I think if we just isolate those numbers, we say, you know, those are great, those are showing improvement, but they are nowhere near where we want them to be. They're nowhere near what we would be satisfied with. And that brings us to the adaptive work that we did. And I'll let you drive, Dr. Campbell.
Sure, thanks. So on the photo here is Dr. Darnisa Amante, and she is the executive director of the Disrupting Educational Equity Project. And after our data conversation around black males in June of 2017, we had Dr. Amante to come in and work with that same group who went through Beyond Diversity 2, who sat down and talked about data. We had Dr. Amante to come and work with us on how do we do this, right? This is such a layered, complex issue. How do we as leaders and as an organization begin to tackle some of the things, beliefs, attitudes that go into some of the challenges that we've been facing? And Dr. Amante, interestingly enough, she just gave the keynote address at District 65 for their opening Institute Day at the beginning of the school year, and I happened to be in there, and it was a remarkable keynote she gave. They gave her a standing ovation at the end of her address, and she has just been so wonderful to us that we're going to have her back to keynote our Connections Conference with our staff next month, and I'm really excited about that. And one of the things that Dr. Amante began to take us through, and this is work that, you know, educational leaders we've discussed at length in a number of other contexts, but for this specific issue, we've talked about it and framed it as an adaptive challenge. And that is, an adaptive challenge is a challenge that involves, problems that are complex, have solutions that aren't clearly arrived at. They trigger loss because they will initiate change, and they require leaders to engage people in order to solve problems. And that's key, because one of the things that we've been doing to really unpack and really understand this adaptive challenge is to rely on one another and engage our stakeholders. This is not what is referred to as a technical challenge, right? So technical challenges require information. Adaptive challenges require transformation, because what we're understanding here is this is going to require a shift in our mindset. right? This is going to require a shift in our beliefs and attitudes around how we engage school, around policies, procedures, all the things that go into what school is. It's going to require us to think about instruction. It's going to require us to think about support. It's going to require us to think about so many things, because if it's not working for Black males, we want to look in and examine that. And without framing this from a deficit model, right, talking about all of the issues and the challenges and so forth, we know what the national backdrop is, right? We know about disproportionality in special education. We know about dropout rates. We know about these things. But what we're trying to do is, as we understand that as a backdrop, we know that if we can tackle and begin to address the issue that we have here, then it will thereby have an effect where we're helping all kids. So by focusing on Black males, this is not simply a zero-sum approach where if we're focused on Black males, they are our only priority. This priority stands out for us in the way that we can engage all kids. So, but this is going to require some thinking and a lot of reflecting, which is what we have been doing and engaging as a staff. So we've been talking about this particular slide here as a community for about 18 months, and that is, whose responsibility is it? Right? And we have framed this responsibility as the leadership and as teachers to really to look within ourselves to see what can we do, right? What change can we engage? We're not necessarily going to wait on the superintendent. We're not going to wait on the board. We're not going to wait on the administration. And I told the staff, I said, if you're looking for us to have the solutions, we don't have them. We're willing to work with you as a community to try to figure this out. And so we're asking folks to really, and ourselves included, to look in the mirror, to think about how can we disrupt our own thinking and disrupt our own perceived narratives around Black male students and how we engage and how we do school so that we can reduce the marginalization that occurs and really propel our students to success.
All right, so there are 5 principles that guide research and practice for young Black men, and this is from the work of Howard, Flenna, and Terry. And this work really helps frame the next couple slides you'll see. First of all, as Dr. Campbell referenced earlier, and as Dr. Witherspoon has pointed out, we've abandoned approaches that are deficit-oriented. We've also, in this work, avoided the false dichotomy focused on either the institution or the individual. We know it's both individuals and institutions. We know it's both. It's not one or the other, and that's traditionally been a place where institutions have fallen down. We acknowledge the complex identities and notions of self that young men have, especially in educational settings. This is complex work, there are complex identities, and again, this all speaks to the need for adaptive change. We also call for the voices of Black male students to be central in research and in practice. And what you'll see in the subsequent slide is how we've really utilized that approach to guide our curriculum reviews and also to work on our Black summits, our program planning. And we also need to pay attention to the intersectionality of factors such as race, class, gender, and more, when making identity construction and sense-making with Black males. There's no one narrative here, right? There's a multiplicity of narratives, and we need to get away from the single dominant Black male narrative that's out there. So here are some examples, right? First of all, teachers, department chairs, administrator leadership really combined to work on this. Very, very focused, whether it was leadership team meetings, whether it was teachers in their classrooms, department chairs reviewing grade distributions with teachers and with their departments, and also with their supervisors going over this, right? What can we do? What's our approach? But also in each of those pockets, working on adaptive processes, like what is your why? Why are you engaged in this work? Sharing that. Special Education Department dedicated several of their department meetings to sharing their why. All of our departments worked on their why individually and collectively at the start of last school year. So that's a great example of this kind of adaptive change. Our Wildcat Academy example is really about an associate principal who was responsible for Wildcat Academy, looked at the data, connected what he was seeing in the data to the teacher leader who was working out with Wildcat Academy, to teachers, to department chairs, to reach out to students to ensure that the black male students, that we could reach more students and get more students to Wildcat Academy. And we saw those results as a part of that effort. We saw, if you want to talk about the Black Summit programming, Dr. Campbell?
Sure. So one of the things that we did, it seemed like a contradiction, but it wasn't. We went from having Black Male Summit and Black Female Summits to just the Black Summits because that's what students wanted, right? They wanted to be together and they wanted to talk through the intersecting identities of what it means to be who they are in this building, even if they don't identify within the gender binary. But even within the summit planning, there were a lot of conversations around toxic masculinity and a number of discussions that were centered around the engagement of black students with each other, as far as, being from the diaspora and a number of other things that we attempted to do. So it was really important to highlight that with the summit planning, every black male student who attended the summit had a conversation about what toxic masculinity looks like, right? And what the narratives that go into the media and how those narratives get played out here in the school. So that was huge, and we plan to continue a lot of that work moving forward.
And that brings me to curriculum reviews. The central question when we do curriculum reviews is, to what extent do current curricular and instructional design support the success of all students, particularly black male students? We then engage our teachers in looking at and asking for both hard data, numbers, but also in what kinds of questions would you like to ask students in terms of the experience they're getting in your class? And then our research department sets out and conducts a series of focus groups, affinity focus groups, by subgroup within the district, within the course, and really gets at questions of identity, questions of not just academic rigor, but is your identity being affirmed in class, and really analyzing that kind of information. Those reports are written up, and these aren't just focus groups of like 5 students. These are focus groups of 75 to 100 students broken out over several weeks as part of that report. It's the first time we've privileged student voice, and particularly the voice of black males in the curriculum. So it's a very important way to look at that. We also have students who are now going to engage in analyzing those transcripts to make sure that we're getting it right. Again, not putting the adult filter on the experience, but asking students, hey, when we make this inference, are we correct? In research, that's called a member check, but that's also really, really good practice. That brings me to discovering success through music. This was a pilot program we ran last year with Carla Clark and Nick Gale and Allie Hart through our Freshman Advisory Study Hall program. This focused on brain development related to music and reading and social emotional learning and support. There were 33 students enrolled in the program, 12 black males. They did a variety of things. There was a lot of experiential learning, hands-on, going to places like the Goodman and Northlight Theaters. They saw some really, if you're looking at statistics, numbers-wise, 73% of the students earned honor roll or high honor roll who were enrolled in that program. But more significantly, and this is the adaptive change, students described the classroom environment as family. That's the level of trust and the level of community that was built within the context of that classroom. So that's really significant and important. Sophomore English last year was a Pathway to Honors course. We set high expectations. We had teacher buy-in and autonomy within the structure, academic supports that were revisioned for the course, process-driven assessments, portfolios, and really what ended up happening was that we saw the best grade distribution for our black male students in sophomore English classes. What we did was we looked at the tracked versions, took all of those students, looked at isolated black males, looked at how they were doing previously, and we compared that to last year where we put every student together in the sophomore writing workshop Pathway to Honors course. And we saw more black male students earning A, Bs, and Cs than ever before, whether tracked or untracked. So that was really, really significant. And again, there was a lot of conversations about, as we built the class, how we were going to, what we were going to do in terms of process and how process is beneficial, process writing, and creating a climate and culture within the course that that privileges all student voice within the context of the classroom. And finally, biology with support. That's we created a structurally flexible support for our biology with support class, which is a class taken by sophomores. That would, instead of taking 2 periods, it actually allowed, it was a flexible support program, and it actually allowed our students to take extra electives. All too often we find that the decisions we make structurally impede students, particularly black male students, from taking a variety of electives. And wherever we can see an opportunity to increase elective participation for our students, we do so. I do this one. All right. So looking forward, there's a lot to look forward to. This work is really in its infancy, right? I really want to point that out. We're really at the beginning and we're in the opening act, right? We might even be before the opening act. So with that in mind, we really need to continue to examine our structures, practices, and policies and procedures to make systemic improvements, right? I mean, we need to be very conscious of this. Reflect on what needs to change, focus on students' differing needs, and have high expectations for everyone. We also need to examine our restorative practices, alternative to suspension programs, and structures to include student voice as part of this work. And we're learning every day about how to do that and how not to do that. There are pitfalls in that work. There have been books written about it, actually, that articulate what those pitfalls are, and that good intentions only get you so far. So we're being very thoughtful about that work. And we continue to examine the social construct of race and gender and how the narratives of such constructions impact the lives of ETHS students, particularly black males. And you're on. And we just change that. There you go.
Because ultimately, this is what we really want. We want to get rid of the fence, yes, right, and the need for the boxes, right? And which brings us to a point where every student can see the game regardless of who they are, where they come from, and that's what we're working towards. We'll take your questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and the slides. I will open it up for questions. Monique? Yes.
This is really challenging work. And it seems to me that there's a tension, and I don't know how you deal with this, which is you use data to identify the challenge, black male. You use data to measure the results, right? But in between, we know, because we repeated it over and over again, which because it's so true, that there is not a single black male narrative, that it's a multiplicity of narratives. So it's probably true that various changes will help some black male students, and other changes will help other black male students, right? And I wonder, in terms of, I know it's not a program, but in terms of programming to implement that's a big challenge, isn't it?
It is, and but within that is, how do we address our beliefs and mindsets, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we're really trying to focus on as we think about the day-to-day, right? Think about what we do every single day. Are there things that we can adjust that aren't necessarily programmatic, that's just regular standard practice of school that we can shift and change that really can lift up and affirm the identities of black male students?
Well, I guess what I'm saying, though, is that you would be able to identify things that we should adjust, mm-hmm, but what we should adjust might be different for some students than other students.
It is going to vary, right? And our hope is to look at that entire continuum and make sure that all of students, black male students, and all students at ETHS are getting what they need.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Just to jump onto that a little bit, you talked a lot about adaptive solutions and how important it is to, it's kind of like thinking out of the box. You know, we've already done the programs, we've already put the money behind some of the programs and the supports, but now we're trying to look a little bit deeper and come up with a more creative type of approach that is, like you said, it's a whole different way of doing things, and trying to keep people in this work despite the challenge is tricky, because it looks so massive on one hand, but then on the other hand, it looks like this is the way it is.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes hard to identify those pieces that look like just the way it is.
Yeah.
So, so it is challenging.
Yeah, and we want to look at ourselves and believe that we can make a difference.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
If we can really think, not just think outside of the box, but also ask our students what they need, you know,
Yeah.
to tell us.
That's
Because
awesome.
we don't want to mine their voices for the sake of our own agendas.
Right.
But we really want to center their voices for change.
Right.
Right? And so that's what's driving a lot of what we do for that continuum, Jonathan, right? Because we're getting a variety of students with different needs and centering all of those voices so that we get a comprehensive view of what this experience is like, and what can we do to make some adjustments as a school and our learning community to meet their needs.
What I'm most concerned about going forward with the work is not that we replicate what we did in this year or last year, but that it continues to progress to meet the needs as we go forward. We can't turn this into a multi-tiered program.
No.
And that's one of the challenges that gets to what you brought up, Jonathan, and I think addresses what you're talking about, Pat.
And it may be that it's really basic. I'm not an expert educator in this stuff. I'm just a parent of a black boy. So, you know, it is, I think you said something that was, you pulled it out, but it was very profound with the music course, in that they felt like they were family, and it was only 12 black boys in that class, right? So it is creating an environment that they see themselves in, that they feel welcomed in, and then you start being innovative and creative. But I think what you're doing is being very intentional about looking at the information that's in front of you, right? The data that we all know, that it's not just Evanston data, but it's in our society, and then saying that ETHS is going to be intentional about how we create this space, this environment for our black boys, our black males, and then you get creative, right? But you can't do that without having an environment that they walk in each day and feel like this is just as much their environment, their community, their neighborhood that it is anyone else's. So we had a discipline committee meeting earlier today, so it was it's really promising. I feel good seeing the same information that you're speaking about, some of the same things that you're discussing here, also being discussed at the discipline committee. And we know that this is a snapshot, so I'm really looking forward to how this has translated into how we discipline our black males, and, you know, the restorative practices that you spoke of or that you highlighted, but that we go deeper into that, because then that starts changing the culture of how we see them and how we deal with them. I know there was some questions last year about what does it mean to be to have a disruptive behavior tag, or what does that look like, right? And so when we start seeing changes in how we treat them, then I think we can continue to say that, yes, we are definitely moving this needle. This is a glimpse. I'm looking forward to what it looks like overall, but this is very promising, and it is not a quick fix.
Right.
But it definitely starts with the mindset, the mirror. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
It's not complicated. That's where it starts. So thank you for this deep dive and helping us understand what the Year of the Black Male was all about.
Thank you. And I will say to that, when you were speaking, Monique, one of the things that came to mind was the work that you all did with the extracurricular code last year and the dress code. It feels so good not to have to police students about hats, right? When we talk about how they treat
basic,
kids in their environment, like to say, you know what, wear your hat, right? For one of our Latinx kids, he wore sombrero the first day of school, right, because he could. And that environment has really shifted how kids feel about their school, that they get to be themselves and express themselves in a way that is pertinent to them without the school, harassing or saying that you can't do or you can't be that. And that was a risk. No, it was a risk. It took a lot of courage, right, to do that. Those are kind of some of the things that we've been thinking about. And some of the things that we've even moved forward with that has helped us big picture with some of this work.
Thank you.
Pat?
So I just want to commend you for this fabulous work, because I think frameworks and structures and programs are not bad things, and we've done some really good, and when I say we, I mean nationally, but at ETHS, we've done some great work there. But I think what I'm hearing is this very deep and specific, looking really at the specific to understand the broader. So to understand individual student experience, and really capturing the student voice in a really authentic way, I think, Pete, you were suggesting, is so powerful because, despite the best intentions, right? You can have the best ideas, but if we're not looking at the specifics of how that plays out for individual kids, we're just gonna capture a group. We're not gonna get it all. And I know it's challenging, but there's complexity to this work and to human beings. And so the dive that you're doing, the deep dive, as Monique said, is just so powerful, and wearing my day job hat, so unusual, because this is not the approach. Again, good people, but aren't really kind of going to this level to understand what the experience is of a policy or a hat, like the craziest thing, what that is, and then taking that information and playing that out on how we improve that experience for that individual, for Black males, and for all of our students. And I think, Marcus, you said that earlier, I think this is learning that will only benefit every one of our students. But particularly, we have a lot of work to do with our Black males. We owe it to them. And so I think doing justice to them at the same time as helping everybody, I'm in. So congratulations, really, you should be very proud of this work. It's very good, and I hope it continues and grows over time. So thank you.
I was wondering, and I think it's tremendous work that we're embarking on, and it's courageous work. And like Monique, I was really pleased to hear the experience that the young men had in the music class. I'm thinking, and especially being an educator, I'm thinking in the ideal world, they would feel like that in every class, right? So that's about building community. And there are ways to do that. So I'm just wondering, are we exploring ways in which we can improve our practice in building community in the classroom to normalize it?
Yes. So during our opening ceremonies, Dr. Witherspoon laid out a frame philosophically on what we're doing. And so did I. And one of the things that I spoke about was this idea of well-being, right? That everything that we are doing, right, at ETHS has well-being at its core and it's focused. Essentially what I said was, and this is more of this is not a pedagogical strategy or technique, right? Although I do have a follow-up to what I'm saying. It's really about, checking in with the student, to see how they're doing, to see how they're feeling, and to tell them that they're having a good day, right? Those are the kind of conversations that we're having with the faculty, because we say, you just don't know what a kid's going through, right? We want to do the best that we can to make our school a very welcoming place. And I talked about one student who wasn't a black male, but was going through a serious crisis, and one of our safety staff very lovingly approached the student and, averted something that could have been a very tragic, difficult situation just by a loving approach. I see you, what's going on, is there any way that I can help? And that is the kind of school we would want to continue to be for every student at every level. Now, with that being said, we did stumble upon a workshop where 14 of our staff members went to a workshop where they were talking about the democratic classroom, and it's really about turning over student agency to the students in the classroom. And they have some very specific instructional techniques about engaging students and creating a culture and a climate of belonging. And all 14 of them said it was life-changing professional development that we hope to expand here. So we're pleased about the promise of what that could be in the coming months.
Thank you.
It's exciting.
I'd just like to reiterate what Marcus said, because it has been so heartwarming to see how our faculty and staff have been embracing the idea that the core of our work is about the well-being of each and every child. And when we remember that, then all sorts of things radiate out from that. Many of these other indicators that we looked at are going to be greatly affected if a child, first of all, knows that we're looking out for their well-being, and that they sense it, and they hear it, and they feel it, and they experience it throughout the school. Well, what I really want to give great credit to is what a huge percentage of our staff members are really embracing that concept, embracing the idea that we're not here to teach math. We're here to look out for the well-being of a child so that child can learn math more effectively. I'm not an English teacher, I'm a teacher of students. And within that, as we look out for them as individuals and look out for what's going to help them grow and nurture and feel part of a family, how is that going to then play out in them being more receptive to and frankly learning more English? So even our concept of why we're here, and because, and many of you would know in high schools across the country for many, many years, somebody say, I'm a math teacher, I'm a history teacher, I'm an English teacher. And the real response is, I am a teacher of students, I am a nurturer of learning, and I'm doing it through math and English and science and the like. So it is a major part of our expressed and intentional culture, and we discuss it all the time. And I must tell you, Marcus heard a lot of this, but I have to just also add some smiles. How many staff members responded so well to that discussion with the entire faculty and staff in the auditorium about well-being? And I would hear them come back and say, it was so great to hear that. That's so powerful. That's exactly how I feel. And Marcus, I know you heard a lot of it, but I heard a lot of it about that as well.
Thanks.
Mike?
I'm sitting here looking at those slides, and I would just simply say that our aspirations for the reality expressed by the second slide, the one in the middle and the liberation on the right, cannot be achieved without achieving the work that you're engaged in, without progressing way down that road that you're on. You can't get there without doing this. This is really encouraging. We've been saying for years that we want to make sure that we give every child what they need to succeed. And this is at the core of it. This attitude, this shift, this transformational shift of how we do school, to use your phrase, Dr. Campbell, this is what's required. And I'm really encouraged that, I mean, first of all, every time I think about it, my head explodes. I mean, the complexity of this overwhelms me, right? And I'm grateful to all of you for taking it on, because I know how hard it is. I know how difficult this must be. Well, I can only imagine, really. I probably don't know, but I can imagine. So, but I come back to it, we can't get there without doing this work. And so thank you, and keep going. And let us know what we can do to support these efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is amazing. This is the work. This is what it's all about. This is everything we've been thinking about, working for. This is really the manifestation. So, and like you said, Dr. Bavis, we're just starting. We're just starting. So I appreciate not only you, but the entire staff. A lot of people are at work at a lot of different levels, areas, everywhere, including our students. So this is community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.